You think you know the exact moment your life is supposed to change, but it's never the big dramatic explosion. It's a quiet click, like a lock turning on a door you never knew was there. Before I tell you how I ended up on the wrong side of that door, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. And please, comment where you're watching from so I know I'm not alone in this. My story started with the rain, a relentless, freezing downpour that cut our house off from the rest of the world. The power had been out for an hour, and the cold was starting to feel personal, like it was seeping right into my bones. My husband was stranded in another city, which meant I was alone with Liam, his oldest, most loyal friend. He'd been a fixture in my life for years, always respectful, almost like a brother. But in the flickering candlelight, something was different. He wasn't looking at me like his best friend's wife. He was just looking at me. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop a shiver, but his eyes caught the movement instantly. "You're freezing," he said, his voice low and rough, cutting through the silence. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, an observation so intense it felt like he could feel the cold on my own skin. I met his gaze across the room, and a jolt, sharp and electric, shot straight through me. In that one look, I knew this night was going to be a dangerous game. He finally broke the silence, clearing his throat. "We should get the fire going. It'll warm the place up faster than these candles." I just nodded, unable to trust my voice. Watching him move was a special kind of torture. Every motion was efficient, controlled, from the way he knelt by the hearth to the solid sound of the poker against the grate. I felt like a ghost in my own home, watching a life I could have had play out in the shadows. To keep my hands busy, I went to the kitchen to get us some water, my bare feet cold against the floorboards. The silence was thick, broken only by the crackling of the new fire and the relentless drumming of the rain. When I came back, he was standing, watching the flames take hold. I held out a glass to him, and as he took it, his fingers brushed against mine. It wasn't an accident. It was too slow, too deliberate. A current of pure heat shot up my arm, and I snatched my hand back like I'd been burned. He didn't apologize. He just held my gaze over the rim of the glass as he took a long, slow drink, his eyes never leaving mine. It was a challenge, a question. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. I could feel the invisible line between us being drawn taut, ready to snap. I had to say something, anything to break the spell. "Mark would have given up and just piled on blankets by now," I said, my voice sounding thin and shaky. A small, humorless smile touched Liam's lips. "Mark's a lucky guy," he said, his voice a low rumble. But he wasn't looking at the fire anymore. He was looking at me, and in his eyes I saw longing that had nothing to do with my husband. The fire was helping, but the chill in the air was stubborn. A third person in the room with us. Liam put his glass down and walked over to the old wooden chest in the corner, the one where I keep the extra quilts. He pulled out the heaviest one, a thick, plush thing my grandmother made. "Let's warm up the room," he said, his voice soft, but the words hung in the air, loaded with a meaning that went far beyond the temperature. He was offering a truce, an invitation into a shared space that was both a sanctuary and a trap. I should have said no. I should have told him I was fine, grabbed my own blanket, and sat on the other side of the room, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just watched, frozen, as he unfolded it and sat on the sofa, leaving just enough space for me. Every step I took toward him felt like a surrender. I sat down, careful to keep a few inches of cold cushion between us, my body rigid with a mix of fear and anticipation. He draped the heavy quilt over both of us, and the weight was immediate, grounding. But under its cover, a new world was created. A dark, warm, secret space where the rules of the outside world didn't apply. I was so aware of him, of the solidness of his thigh just inches from mine, of his scent, a mix of rain and wood smoke and something that was just him. My mind was screaming, "This is Mark's best friend, this is wrong." But my body, the traitor, was leaning in, craving his heat. Then it happened. He shifted, just a fraction, and the side of his knee made deliberate, unhurried contact with mine. It wasn't a bump. It was a declaration, a point of ignition. A searing heat flooded my entire body, pooling low and heavy in my stomach. I couldn't breathe. I slowly lifted my head, and my eyes locked with his. The firelight danced in his pupils, revealing a raw, undisguised hunger that mirrored the storm raging inside me. The game was over. This was real. And without a single word, I pressed my knee back against his. The pressure of his knee against mine was an answer and a question all at once. The silent agreement sent a tremor through my entire body, a seismic shock that reordered my world. The cold room, the storm outside, my husband stranded miles away, it all faded into a distant hum. The only reality was the suffocating electric heat building under the heavy quilt. The world had shrunk to this sofa, to the space between our bodies, a territory we were both now claiming. I could feel the rhythm of his breathing, or maybe it was my own. I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. My mind was a frantic mess of warnings, flashing images of Mark's trusting face, but my blood was singing a different song, a dangerous, hypnotic melody. He shifted his weight, a minute adjustment that brought the entire length of his thigh flush against mine. It wasn't aggressive, it was a confirmation, a quiet, possessive claim. I felt the muscles in his leg tense, and I just knew, he was fighting the same war I was, and he was losing. Liam, I whispered, the name barely a puff of air, a final, flimsy shield against the inevitable. We can't. My voice was a stranger's, thin and pathetic against the roar of the fire and the storm in my veins. He didn't answer right away. He just turned his head slowly, and in the dim, flickering light, his eyes were dark pools of want. The careful, respectful friend was gone. In his place was a man who was looking at me like he'd been starving for years, and I was the first meal he'd seen. I know, he breathed, his voice a low, rough rumble that vibrated through the point where our bodies touched. He knew, and he wasn't stopping. His hand, which had been resting on the cushion between us, moved. It slid under the quilt, and I held my breath, every nerve ending on high alert. I expected him to touch my leg to claim more ground, but he didn't. His fingers just brushed against the fabric of my dress, tracing the line of my knee with an agonizing slowness. It was a touch that asked for permission while already knowing the answer. Every rational thought I had was incinerated in the heat of that simple, devastating caress. I should have pushed him away, stood up, run from the room. Instead, I found myself turning toward him, my body acting on a will of its own. The quilt shifted around us, our own private tent shielding us from the world. Our faces were inches apart now. I could see the firelight reflected in his pupils. I could smell the wood smoke on his skin. I could feel his breath ghosting across my cheek. It was a moment suspended in time, the final second before the fall. Alara, he murmured, his voice thick with a raw need that shattered my last piece of resolve. He lifted his hand from my knee and brought it to my face, his thumb stroking my jawline, a touch that was both tender and unbearably possessive. I closed my eyes, leaning into his palm, a silent surrender. This was it. The lock had clicked, the door was open, and I was stepping through. His other arm came around my waist, pulling me impossibly closer until there was no space, no air, no doubt left between us. He was going to kiss me, and I was going to let him. His lips crashed against mine, and it wasn't a kiss, it was a collision. All the tension, all the stolen glances and unspoken words of the past few years ignited in a single, desperate moment. There was no tenderness, no gentle exploration. It was pure, unadulterated need, a hunger so profound it was violent. My hands, which had been frozen at my sides, flew up, tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as if I could somehow absorb him into me. He groaned against my mouth, a low, guttural sound that was part surrender and part conquest. The heavy quilt slid to the floor, forgotten, exposing us to the cool air and the flickering judgment of the firelight. It didn't matter. The only heat I could feel was the inferno raging between us. His hands were everywhere at once, one tangled in my hair, tilting my head back, the other sliding down my spine, pressing me so hard against him I could feel the frantic, hammering beat of his heart against my own. I was arching into him, a willing participant in my own destruction. The navy blue dress, my shield of modesty, felt like a prison. My fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel the warmth of his skin against mine. The logical part of my brain, the part that belonged to Mark, was a tiny, screaming voice drowned out by a tidal wave of pure sensation. This was a brutal, honest language our bodies had been dying to speak. Every touch was a confession. Every desperate kiss was an apology and an accusation. We were a whirlwind of limbs and frantic breaths on the living room floor. Two people finally succumbing to a gravity they'd been fighting for far too long. The storm outside was nothing compared to this. This was the real cataclysm, the reordering of my entire universe. And in that moment, as he whispered my name like a prayer and a curse, I didn't care if the whole world burned down around us. All that mattered was this fire, this release, this complete and total fall from grace. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The relentless drumming of the rain had stopped, and in its place was the gentle, almost mocking sound of water dripping from the eaves. The fire had died down to a soft, orange glow, casting long, apologetic shadows across the room. Reality didn't just creep back in, it slammed into me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I was lying on the floor of my living room, tangled in the limbs of my husband's best friend. My dress was bunched up around my waist, his shirt was discarded by the hearth. The air, which moments ago had been electric with passion, was now thick and heavy with shame. I could feel the heat of his skin against mine, but it no longer felt like a comfort. It felt like an indictment. I carefully, slowly, untangled myself from him, my movements stiff and robotic. He didn't try to stop me. I saw him stir, his eyes opening to the dim light of the approaching dawn. He looked at me, and the raw hunger from before was gone, replaced by a dawning horror that I knew was a perfect mirror of my own. I couldn't hold his gaze. I scrambled to my feet, pulling my dress down, my hands shaking as I tried to smooth the wrinkles as if I could somehow erase what had just happened. The room looked the same, but it was irrevocably changed. It was a crime scene, and we were the guilty parties. Liam sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair, refusing to look at me. The silence between us was a living thing, a suffocating presence filled with everything we couldn't say. What have we done? The thought screamed in my head. I looked at the photograph of Mark and me on the mantelpiece, his smiling, trusting face a brutal stab of guilt. A dirty, exhilarating secret now existed in this house, in the space between Liam and me. It was a poison, and we had both willingly, eagerly drank it down. The next morning was a masterclass in denial. We cleaned up the living room in a stiff, agonizing silence, two strangers tidying a crime scene. When Mark's car finally crunched up the gravel driveway a few hours later, the relief was so sharp it felt like pain. He walked in, shaking the last of the rain from his coat, completely oblivious, and the performance began. Liam clapped him on the back, asking about his trip. I kissed his cheek, handing him a warm cup of coffee. We were perfect. We were liars. For the next 2 weeks, we tried to put the storm back in its box. We avoided being alone, we kept our conversations brief and public, but it was useless. The secret was a living entity, a third person that followed us everywhere. The memory of that night was a magnetic field pulling us together. Anytime we were in the same room, the air would thicken, charged with a voltage only we could feel. Mark, bless his innocent heart, saw nothing. He'd laugh and say, "It's so good to have my two favorite people here." And I would smile, a hollow, brittle thing, while under the dinner table, Liam's foot would find mine, a silent, searing question. The addiction wasn't just to him, it was to the danger. The adrenaline of doing it right under Mark's nose was a drug more potent than any kiss. It started with small things, a lingering touch when he handed me a glass of wine, a shared look across a crowded room that said more than an hour of conversation ever could. Then, one Saturday, Mark was in the garage working on his old car. Liam had come over to help, but we both knew the real reason. While Mark was hunting for a specific wrench, Liam cornered me in the laundry room. He didn't say a word. He just backed me against the humming dryer, his body caging mine, and his mouth found my neck. It was frantic, desperate, a stolen moment of pure, selfish need. I could hear Mark whistling just a few feet away, and the terror, the sheer, heart-stopping risk of it, was the most exhilarating thing I'd ever felt. We were no longer just two people who made a mistake. We were partners in a dangerous conspiracy, and every second we got away with it, the deeper we fell. The game got bolder. The risks became part of the thrill, a necessary ingredient. We were no longer avoiding being alone, we were engineering it. A forgotten phone charger that required him to come back, a coincidental meeting at the grocery store that turned into a frantic 10 minutes in the back of his car. We were reckless, drunk on the sheer audacity of it all. I was living two completely separate lives. There was the Alara who made dinner for her husband, who discussed finances and planned vacations, a woman of routine and stability. Then there was the other Alara, the one who lived for the vibration of her phone, announcing a text from him, the one whose body hummed with a constant low-grade fever of anticipation and fear. I was losing track of which one was real. The near miss came on a Tuesday. It was so stupid, so careless, it still makes my stomach clench. He had come over in the afternoon, a brazen visit while Mark was at work. We were in my bedroom, our bedroom, the ultimate transgression. We were so lost in each other that we didn't hear the sound of the front door. It was Mark, home early to surprise me with lunch. The sound of his keys hitting the bowl by the door was like a gunshot. We froze. Panic, cold, and absolute washed over me. Liam was out the back door in seconds, a silent ghost, while I frantically tried to fix myself, to erase the evidence of him from the room, from my skin. I straightened the bedspread, my hands shaking so badly I could barely smooth the fabric, and then I saw it. On the nightstand, next to my wedding photo, was his watch. A simple silver watch Mark had seen on his wrist 100 times. My heart stopped. I snatched it just as Mark's footsteps started up the stairs, shoving it deep into my pocket, the cold metal burning against my thigh. When he walked in, smiling, holding a bag of takeout, I thought I was going to be sick. I smiled back, a horrifying, perfect replica of a happy wife. Who was this person? This woman who could lie so easily to the face of the man she had promised her life to. I didn't recognize her, but I also knew with a chilling certainty that I couldn't stop. I was trapped in a labyrinth of my own making, and every single path I took only led me deeper inside. The breaking point didn't come with a bang, it came with a sigh. Mark came home from work one night looking utterly defeated. He sank onto the couch, loosened his tie, and just stared into space. I sat beside him, playing the part of the concerned wife, my phone still warm in my pocket from a text Liam had sent just minutes before. A dirty little promise about what he wanted to do to me the next time we were alone. I put my hand on Mark's back, rubbing slow circles, the gesture feeling hollow and fraudulent. He finally looked at me, his eyes tired but filled with a deep, unwavering affection that made my stomach turn. "Tough day?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded, leaning his head on my shoulder. "It's just everything," he said. "The pressure at work, the deadlines. It's a lot." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel the tension radiating from him. I braced myself, expecting a complaint, a problem I'd have to help solve. Instead, he squeezed my hand. "But you know," he said, his voice thick with sincerity, "none of it matters when I walk through that door. Knowing I have you, and Liam, it's everything." My blood ran cold. He pushed himself up to look me in the eye. "I was talking to him today. He's just solid, you know? He's more than a friend, he's my brother. I trust him with literally anything. I trust him with my life. And I trust him with you, which is even more important." He smiled, a genuine, loving smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was a spear through my chest. Every lie I'd told, every secret touch, every stolen moment flashed before my eyes, illuminated by the blinding, innocent trust of this good man. I wasn't a woman in the grips of passion anymore. I was a viper. He was warming in his own home. The thrill was gone, replaced by a nauseating, soul-crushing guilt that was so profound it felt like I was drowning. The adrenaline, the danger, the intoxicating game, it all curdled into poison. This wasn't a passionate affair. It was a slow-motion demolition of a man who deserved none of it. I had to get out. I had to make it stop. The weight of it all was going to crush us, and I could suddenly see the final, devastating explosion with perfect, terrifying clarity. I pulled my hand away, stood up, and walked to the window, unable to look at him. This couldn't last. The house of cards was trembling, and I was the one who was about to bring it all down. I met him in the parking lot of a closed down diner, the neon sign buzzing erratically in the damp night air. It was a fittingly bleak backdrop for the conversation I knew we had to have. He was leaning against his car when I pulled up, and the sight of him, all confident swagger, even in the dim light, sent a traitorous jolt through me, but I stomped it down. I got out of my car and walked toward him, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. "We can't do this anymore, Liam," I said. No preamble, no greeting. The words hung between us, stark and ugly. He didn't look surprised. He just watched me, his expression unreadable. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low. I told him, the words tumbling out in a frantic, whispered rush. I told him what Mark had said, how he'd called him a brother, how he'd looked at me with such complete and total trust, it felt like a physical wound. "He knows nothing, Alara," Liam said, taking a step toward me. It was just a comment. I flinched back as if he'd tried to strike me. "Don't you get it? It's not about him knowing, it's about us. It's about what we are doing to him every single day in his own house." My voice was rising, cracking with a hysteria I couldn't control. "What are we even doing? Where does this go? Do you think we just get away with this forever?" He finally showed a crack in his composure, his jaw tightening. "I don't know what we're doing," he admitted, his voice rough. "All I know is that when I'm not with you, I feel like I can't breathe. Is that what you want? To go back to that?" The memory of the fire, of his touch, of that first cataclysmic kiss rose up, and for a second I wavered. The passion was still there, a dark, powerful undercurrent pulling me back toward him. But the fear was stronger now. The fear of the fallout, of the wreckage we were creating, of the look on Mark's face when he finally found out. "It's going to destroy him, Liam," I whispered, my throat tight with unshed tears. "It's going to destroy everything." He closed the distance between us then, grabbing my arms, his grip firm, desperate. "Then let it," he said, his eyes boring into mine, wild with a recklessness that terrified and thrilled me. "Maybe it all needs to be destroyed." He pulled me into a kiss, and it was nothing like before. It wasn't tender or passionate. It was brutal, angry, and full of despair. It was the kiss of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing they were about to fall. When we broke apart, we were both breathing heavily, the air thick with the unspoken truth. This wasn't over. We couldn't stop it any more than we could stop a tidal wave. We just stood there in the flickering light of the broken sign, staring at each other. And we both knew. It wasn't a question of on if it would all blow up in our faces. It was only a question of when. I've been living in a state of suspended animation ever since that night in the parking lot. I go through the motions. I make coffee. I kiss my husband goodbye. I pretend to listen when he talks about his day. But none of it is real. I'm a ghost haunting my own life, trapped in the suffocating silence between two impossible choices. My world has been reduced to 3 doors, and behind each one is a different kind of explosion. Behind door number 1 is the truth. I picture myself telling Mark everything, watching the trust in his eyes curdle into disgust, watching the man I once loved shatter right in front of me. It's an act of cruelty so profound I don't think I could survive it. Behind door number 2 is Liam. The fantasy of it is intoxicating. Running away, starting over, living only in that fire that burns between us. But what happens when the fire dies down? Who are we then? Just two people who torch their own lives for a moment of heat? And then there's door number 3, the hardest one of all, ending it. Walking away from Liam for good, but the very thought feels like trying to tear out my own heart. I'm addicted to the danger, to his touch, to the person I become when I'm with him. I'm paralyzed, stuck in this silent, screaming limbo, and I feel like I'm about to break into a million pieces. And that's why I'm talking to you. I had to tell someone, anyone, before this secret eats me alive from the inside out. I'm sitting in my car right now, parked down the street from my own house because I can't bear to walk through that front door and keep lying. So I'm asking you, what do I do? Do I destroy the good man I'm married to, or do I destroy myself by walking away from the only thing that makes me feel alive? Please tell me what you think I should do and let me know if you even want to hear what happens next, because I have a feeling the choice is about to be taken out of my hands.